We'll talk about trauma. Usually when people hear trauma, they say, what a topic. And I would say it can be curse, it can be blessing. Depends how you turn it. So I experienced both of those, and I can say that, yeah, trauma is very important to know. So what is actually trauma? When do we get traumatized? We get traumatized at the moment when we cannot respond to experience that we have. We are overwhelmed. Like if tsunami hit us. We human have this idea and need to have control. Even our brain knows that we don't control anything. You know, we control small things in our life, but our narcissistic need is to believe, I control. I go here, I do that, I do this. I am control with my plans of my life. Then something hits you, you break in pieces. You are overwhelmed. All your systems are destroyed. Oops, that's the moment when we are traumatized. It's emotional, physical response to an extremely distressed and disturbing event that overwhelm individuals. So many times we show that with the broken glass. What do we do then? Imagine your inner self, your personality, everything who you are, just puff. It's broken in pieces. Try to put one broken glass together. Oh my, who tried that? My kids tried to glue one ball that they broke. It's not easy. Imagine trying to put together back something that is broken through the huge event. Now, in these days, we call everything trauma or stress. It's not. Those who experience trauma, they can see the huge difference between serious, deep traumatic event and stress. Traumatic event is the one that really you feel, I'm dying. That's the end. There is nothing in front. Often when I try to diagnose PTSD, I ask people, where do you see yourself in 3 years? There is no prediction of future. Future, it's lost. Everything is in this moment of destruction. That's why I would say that traumatic experience is the most powerful experience. It impacts individuals, it impacts the groups, but the rest, what happens after that, it impacts our churches. These days I will talk also about transgenerational trauma, about secondary trauma. It impacts our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. As a Jew, I can say that, you know, we are still victims, and we are always victims. And even when we are aggressors, we are still victims. We have excuse for our aggression because we are still victims. So it means that this impact, we are talking about huge impact. Sometimes we don't recognize it in our communities. But all the symptoms, we focus on symptoms and we want to get rid of the symptoms. Symptoms are normal reaction to abnormal situation. It's not normal that somebody attacks me. It's not normal that somebody beats me up. It's not normal that I land in war. It's not normal that somebody points guns at my head. It's not normal that I suffer from earthquake. It's not normal that I lose complete ability to function and to have a control over my life. That's not normal. Reaction to that, it's normal. So the symptoms are normal respond to reaction. And you know, some of the tricky part with trauma, when you compare with some other, you know, disorders or problems, the tricky part is that it goes so deep that person can even look very functionable. And then in 10 years, the trigger, top, something crazy goes on. And then you look and say, what's wrong with this person? What's happening? What is the issue? So, you know, some of most common symptoms include re-experiencing the traumatic event. Many times with my clients, I heard that part. The women who were doing the war in Yugoslavia, I worked a lot with victims of that war. She would say, I start functioning. I kind of adapted. I was a refugee. Everything was fine. 10 years later, I find myself at the market. I see the guy in uniform walking through the market. Flashbacks, I was done. I just couldn't think. I couldn't function. I couldn't breathe. I got panic attack. And she couldn't even understand what happened. So it means that still trauma was living deep inside. That's why it's important for us to be aware about that. Avoidance of reminding of the traumatic event. Those symptoms, we don't have lots of time to go through all those. Those symptoms determine how do we live our life. I will avoid for the rest of my life the street that I was in touch with. I will avoid everything that can remind me. I will avoid relationships. So my brain is occupied to construct my future life with the need to go around and to prevent flashbacks or re-traumatization. So those are deep inside behaviors that when you ask somebody, why do you do that? I don't know. Why do you always avoid to sit in this, for example, many times like to sit middle in the room? Yeah, I prefer table in the corner. Why? No clue. Because the walls are behind. So I feel secure, nobody can attack me from the back. Oh, so your life is determined with the fear that somebody can attack you from the back. So it means that we don't live freely if we didn't process our traumas. Hyperarousal and, you know, feeling losing control. This feeling of losing control makes us trying to control everything. You know those controlling people? Who's coming then? Everything is constructed. Why? Why do you have to control everything? Simply because sometimes you lost the control. You know what it means not to have a control. We try after trauma to gain control back. And then we go in hyper-controlling our family, our children, everybody. Our trauma is asking for it. Maybe we will just see, oh, hyper-controlling person, but we would never connect with maybe events that happens in the childhood as a traumatic experience. Acute stress reaction, it goes for 30 days. And then we have post-traumatic stress disorder that after that, we already start developing long-term impact. And then delay effect. You construct your life, you think everything is now under control, I know where I'm going, everything is functioning fine, and then delay effect. Years later, you're again at the same point. What makes trauma the most powerful experience in humans? Disruption of sense of safety. We as humans have this deep need to feel safe. Even when we are not, we have need to believe that we are in safe place. So trauma attacks that safe place and fully you feel like walking on the water. So it means that you can drown every second. And it's terrible inner feeling. When you wake up every day and then you have this feeling, okay, is somebody coming from this side? Is somebody going to attack me from that side? It's really disturbing. Overwhelm and helplessness. What happens when we are traumatized, especially with abused people, or we are helpless. We can't change the situation. Helplessness is something that makes us vulnerable and feeling traumatized because you can't do anything. Somebody pointed gun at your head and you can't do anything. This feeling of being, fully helpless in situation gives trauma power. Impact on identity and beliefs. It impacts really who I am. Maybe till the moment of traumatic event, I believe that I'm a very strong, very capable person, that I'm an okay human being. I had some beliefs about myself. Trauma destroys them. It breaks them in piece. So it fully destroys your beliefs and who you are. Emotionally distress and dysregulation. So it starts really that you have intrusive thoughts, that you're all the time thinking about events, that you have pictures in your head. I worked with war veterans. That's how we start researching actually PTSD, through them. Vietnam veterans, that was the first time when we start using those terms. Why? Because those people came back with extreme intrusive thoughts. They start drinking, taking drugs, having addictions. Why? Because they just wanted their brain to stop turning around and around and around. They just wanted those pictures to disappear so that they can sleep in peace. And when they can't find any other way, they start drinking or taking drugs. Because it's impossible when your brain is all the time moving the same story. It disturbs memory and intrusive symptoms. Memory is attacked, or you have people don't have memories, they have just intrusive thoughts, or you have people stuck in the memory. Impact on relationship and trust. Once going through traumatic event, I don't believe the world is safe place. It's never a safe place again. I have to rebuild that. I learned that by kids. When working with traumatized children, they showed me very directly how they don't believe that the world is a safe place. So it means we have to rebuild that. Complexity and chronicity. Trauma is very complex. We cannot explain here in a short time. I sometimes do 3-4 days trauma trainings to make churches more trauma informed, because it's a very deep and very complex. Okay, but let us try to understand also trauma from biblical perspective. Of course, in the Bible, you don't have, we are not talking about psychological trauma, but many biblical stories, like stories from Job, David, Jesus himself, are telling us about traumatic experiences they had. I mean, David, through his psalms, he was really highly traumatized. And even through his behavior, you see results of trauma. So here are some key points on biblical perspective on psychological trauma, and of course healing. Acknowledgement of suffering. The Bible is acknowledging suffering. It's not closing eyes to suffering. So you can see a lot of those in Psalm, and especially in Psalm 22, when it says, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's a scream of somebody in deep pain. That's your soul screaming. And I think all those who experience this deep pain know what that scream means. Where are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries on anguish? I was always asking myself, what is the biggest dream of a traumatized person? As a Jew, I researched a lot also transgenerational trauma. What is our biggest dream? I realized it's to have the power. In the moment of traumatic experience, we were helpless, hopeless, lost. And then I researched what the children are dreaming of. To be superheroes, to have some special gun, to have the power on earth, to have, and then you see that in the nations, highly victimized nations. What is their dream? To have the power, and they become easily aggressors. So victim and aggressor I see as this sand clock, just turning one way or the other way. Victim and aggressor are this. Believe me. Why? Because every victim dreams of having a power over others, because the power he lost once. And you can see that in the families, abusive families also, that system repeats. But also, let's continue on the perspective from Bible. God's presence in suffering. God is always present in suffering. I was asking myself, why did Moses need 40 years in desert to get out of it? Couldn't God show him, just go left and just get it? It's not that complicated. I live in Israel. Egypt is here. Land is here. Just go and maybe in 1 year you will make it. Why did he let them go 40 years through the desert? Because he teach them so much in that desert. And we all need sometimes desert in our life. To teach, not to pray to other gods and just you can read there what they were learning also. It's not the problem, the bad experience that we have. We need them. The problem is when we are alone in them. One child, when I asked him, he was very abused and lost and stayed without parents. When I asked him, what was the worst for you living on the streets for 10 years and taking care of yourself, even he was a very small boy. He never mentioned that the worst thing was that he was beaten up, that he was abused, that he was sold, no. And that surprised me deeply. He told me the fact that I was alone, a loneliness. So it's not always the experience that we have, it's the fact that we are left alone in that experience. That's why we have to cherish Christian community and taking care of each other in the churches. Because every experience belongs to human, and we can overcome with the presence of God, but with the presence of each other. So that surprised me deeply, because I would say, for me, the worst would be somebody attacked me. No, he said, I could survive all of that. But the fact that in the evening, I would sit under the bridge alone. There is nobody there to hug me, to be just there. That's the worst experience we can have. And the Bible, says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The Bible acknowledges trauma, and God is with those who are suffering. Healing and restoration. Bible talks a lot about healing and restoration, and that's a job of each of us. We cannot say just, oh, the world is bad, people are going through the bad experiences. Yes, that's true. Oh, God, where were you 40 years? You let us go through the desert. Who are in desert knows how it looks like. It's terrible. But then God says, and did you die? I was feeding you with manna from heaven. Even the rock, from the rock, the water came for you. What's the problem? The problem is not in bad experiences that we have. Those are part of life. The problem is that we don't go to healing and restoration. So the problem are not, and it took me a long time to understand that point, because I really believed, why did you let women that I worked with being raped, daughters in front of the mothers, had to leave their houses. I worked with war victims. How could you do that? I was angry at God. And I couldn't understand the point, because everything with God has a meaning. What's the meaning of that? Until I recognize that everything in life can be restored and healed. Everything. Some of my students told me that a new research showed that the anxiety disorder cannot be healed, that you can learn to live with that. That's not true. I worked with people I'm a therapist for over 30 years. Everything can be healed and restored with God's support. It doesn't matter how bad it looks like. Now I prepare a program for working with Christians in Gaza, and I talk to them every day. And then I realize there is something, we don't have time to talk about that most wonderful thing we call resiliency. And then I realized they are in better shape than half of the Europe. They are in better shape than half of the Europe spiritually, because they don't have anything else than to rely on God. Sometimes, I guess, and that's the fact with the Jews, finally, the promised land is there, 40 years, we learned many lessons, but then we forget them tomorrow. And there God says, and please, when you enter in this land, don't forget what I have done for you. Don't forget that I was feeding you with manna from heaven. Don't forget that I was leading you. Don't forget this and that. They forgot. So we easily forget what God is doing. But it's important to remember that healing and restoration, He heals the brokenhearted. We are only, as a counselors, as a psychotherapist, we are only the tool in His hand. By working with highly traumatized people, I believed in the science. I studied trauma for 20 years. I went to US, I went to Germany, I went all over the world trying to understand trauma. I still don't have no clue, to be honest. I still realize it's not about that. It's not about that, it's much more than that. And this is realizing that not trauma itself is a problem. The problem is that we don't start walking the healing path and restoration. And everything what is destroyed can be restored. Expressing of lament. The Bible provides a model of expressing pain and lament. I grew up in the society where I was taught not to cry, not to fight with God, not to cry. And even when we were persecuted, when I would be mocked in the school because I was Christian, during the communist time, when I would experience bad things, forget about it and move on. Everything will be fine. That's not true. God doesn't want us to do that. Give people opportunity to lament, to express their pain. That's what my boys that I worked with, who told me, most painful was that I was alone. I could survive the fact that I was beaten up, but I couldn't survive the fact that I was alone in my pain. We need place and time to express our pain, to cry our soul out, to cry on somebody's shoulder, and to lament. And psalms are filled with cries of distress and questions to God, demonstrating that it is appropriate to bring your pain in front of God. If it's appropriate to bring your pain in front of God, then it's appropriate to bring it in front of each other. It's fully appropriate. But we have to learn one lesson, to accept that pain is a normal part of our life, to accept that sometimes it has a very good purpose for us, that God has meaning for everything. Like he had meaning for 40 years of desert for Jewish people. He had meaning. Look, when they finally get out, they had already constructed their state, they had system, they had hierarchy, they had, I think they had some character. They had enough experience to trust who their God is. It took them 40 years. I mean, we Jews are a little bit slow. Some people maybe learn in 10, but we always take time. Yeah, it needed those things. When you are in pain and suffering, you see only pain and suffering. It's enough when you have a headache. You don't see anything else except your headache. And then you are fully in that, and we lose vision. That's normal, we are human. But then I need somebody else to have this vision for me, to remind me, oh, you remember, that's the same God that was feeding you with manna. That's the same God that did all those things for you. It's okay to be lost when you have a friend that has a map. And that's our community support. So the Bible emphasizes the importance of community in bringing burdens to each other. Carry each other burdens, and in this way you will feel the law of Christ. It means that God never wanted somebody to be alone in his pain. He's the one that says, you should be together when you're suffering. I always complained about this part in the Bible because I missed the part, and how. It didn't give me a recipe, just said, carry the burden of each other. And I think my mission at this moment is to teach people how. That's why Jelena and I are working in the building counseling schools in Middle East, in Syria, in Palestine, other countries, because there is a how. And we as a counselors, as a psychologist, psychotherapist, we know how. And we are responsible to do that properly. Hope and restoration. The Bible offers hope for the future. Trauma is here. There is something behind, but there is a life in front. Do not permit one or many traumatic events to take off your future. Build a future. This ultimate hope can provide comfort in the midst of present suffering. So asking people sometimes, where do you see yourself in 3 years? Oh, there is something in front of me. There is some 3 years in front, some 10 years in front. There is a future. Rebuild future. Transforming through suffering. Suffering can be like a needle in our body that will destroy the rest of our life, and we live it with pain all the time with that here. But we can transform this suffering into something new. Every suffering transforms you to the new person. What kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to repeat and do to others what somebody did to you? Or do you want to do to others something that you wish somebody does to you? Something that can be restoring. That's your choice, But the fact is that we are transformed. Not only so, but we also glory in our suffering, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, character, and character hope. Our character is important to be shaped. The Bible offers profound insight into understanding, addressing psychological trauma. And we, as Christians, are responsible to really, especially we as God's tool as a counselor to really walk the path of healing. To be honest, with some clients I walked for 5, 6, 7 years because trauma was so deep, that destroyed them fully and they need the full restoration. So we have to choose consciously. I will walk with you as long as you need, until you are restored.